had an injury that turns itself from a minor one into a major one simply because of its potential to change your entire way of life. Today I'm going to tell you about the chronic injury that I had that started out as a minor injury but changed into really quite a life-sabotaging one simply because of how it affected me emotionally. So this all happened back in late 2008. I'd been training kind of heavily for the last couple of years. I'd got myself into gymnastics training, strength training, juggling, circus training, slacklining, loads and loads of things, and I was getting really obsessed by it. I had also recently turned 18 and was doing all the things that standard 18-year-olds do, which was kind of living that student lifestyle of just going out and partying as often as I possibly could, sleeping very little. In fact, I think I probably indulged a bit more than everybody else because I wasn't even a student myself at the time. I just had my job and I would go to work and then straight out. There was never any need to come home or study or anything like that. And it was around that time that my business partner Gareth, he had already left Northern Ireland to go to a circus school. The first time that he came back and told me about it, he was just like, dude, you gotta go to this. And so if you're a teenager and you get presented with an opportunity to go and do something completely life-changing, the sensible option would obviously be to cut down on all the partying, start taking this seriously and come up with a full-on training plan of how you're gonna get yourself ready for this audition that is going to decide your eventual fate for your life. Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and no doubt that's probably what I would recommend to my younger self right now, but in reality, I did take it more seriously, but the partying definitely didn't stop. I was finding every opportunity to go out and meet people and consume all kinds of fun-enhancing products. I just kind of decided that if I was going to double down on my training, I could take that time back from some of the more boring bits in my life. So cut down on work and I cut down on sleep. Now, given the demographic of our channel is a lot older, I'm imagining you can already just see this train wreck setting itself up. At the time, I wish I could tell you I was completely ignorant of all of the consequences, or I was just so blinded by all of the fun of being a young adult or teenager. But really, I don't even have an excuse. I was getting well into the brain and neuroscience from the second I left school. One of the biggest things I spent my money on was books about the brain, books about psychology, and quite a few books about the importance of sleep. So really, I can't say I've got any excuse for my behavior at this point. Really, the one thing driving me was I knew probably my best personality or character trait at that point was willpower, determination, and focus. I could go harder than most other people that I knew at pretty much anything. I wasn't necessarily really good at anything, but you give me a task, you tell me I'm not allowed to give up, and that's exactly what's going to happen. My typical day would be to wake up as early as I possibly could, get straight to work and start doing some stretching and flexibility training. Then I would have my gymnastics classes, I'd be coaching, I would eat lunch as quickly as possible, go out and train slacklining. That would be for about an hour. I'd come in, then I'd do some strength training for another hour, and then we get into our afternoon classes of the day. Once I finished those afternoon classes, then I would just stay and train for as long as my body would let me. And then, as I already mentioned, instead of resting, after that would be straight out to find whatever group of people I could attach myself to stay out into the early hours of the morning in some kind of bar or nightclub or house party or whatever was going on at the time. So now let's get into the injury. First thing to start to give were my knees. And this was an injury that really creeped up on me. So it started out very minor. I would just feel right behind the kneecaps that there was just like a super sharp pain, and it would come for maybe just a moment in the day, usually around about the late evening time. Then by the morning it would have just cleared up, and that started to gradually become a regular thing. And after about a month or 2 months, it started getting to the point where that pain was there all the time. It never went away, and that kind of sharp feeling at the back of the kneecaps was physically changing the way I was walking. I was starting to feel like I was having to bend my knees less and less just so I wouldn't be experiencing that pain. Then on top of that, I started getting this extra weird sensation, like it felt like almost when I was walking, I was trying to like wade through syrup or something. The muscles just felt like they were working way harder than they physically needed to. As soon as that happened, it really didn't take long for this to spiral completely out of control. I was training for something that I had now got my entire life set on this. I pretty much didn't have any kind of backup plan, and I'd set myself up so much for success that I never once considered the thought of failure. What am I going to do if this doesn't work out? And that not knowing, that kind of anxiety of not knowing, made even just thinking about it become this terrifying ordeal. And if you look nowadays for the markers of chronic pain, that's exactly one of the top things that always comes up is when you've got just any kind of niggling pain or injury, usually that's just going to clear up. If you just leave it, rest it, almost all the time, the pain's going to go away. Even if there's a physical structural damage, tissue damage normally is able to heal itself completely by about 3 months. However, if that specific injury is getting in the way of how you live your life, and especially if it's doing it in a significant way, actually the pain now is not coming just from the problem itself, which can actually heal up completely and have gone away, is coming from your brain saying there's a big problem and you need to do something about it, and it's just stuck that on a loop on repeat. That's going to increase your stress levels, and one of the other things that amplifies pain symptoms is increased stress levels. That situation comes about, it gets really, really hard to get yourself out of the pain experience because the pain is no longer attached to something physical. So look at this in my position. I was in pain, I was stressing about what that meant for my future, so already high levels of stress. It was also meaning I couldn't do the things that I normally would have done, whether that was my actual job, it was affecting my training, and then if we think about other things that are stressing my body out, well, I'm not getting any sleep. That doesn't seem to be affecting me consciously, but you better bet unconsciously that's having a huge effect on my body's stress levels. So stress levels are going to be through the roof. Even if I wasn't in any kind of pain, I didn't have any injury, that was already going to be going on. When you attach now, there is potentially some structural damage, some physical damage, and my mind's in this infinite cycle of worry. This condition is now well underway to being chronic and well underway to emotionally destroying me. The other thing it's important to bring up here is these, I'm sure, all sound to you like very, very first world problems. The knee injury, I still physically could move around. It sucked getting up, sitting down, bending my knees too much, climbing stairs were all horrible, but I could still actually get them done. I wasn't even working like a horrible job. My future that I had imagined for myself was something that very few people in the world are ever going to get to experience. You know, sometimes your circumstances can be really, really bad, and that sucks too, but sometimes actually you might beat yourself further into this cycle of kind of stress and worry when you tell yourself you don't really have any reason to be feeling so bad about this. Your conscious brain can very well work that out. Your unconscious brain absolutely doesn't care. If something's changing your current state of existence, your unconscious regions of your brain are going to send you into survival mode, even if the thing you're surviving from is totally ridiculous. It's just something to bear in mind. While you may be able to say, this situation, I should be more grateful for the fact that it's not a worse situation than it could currently be, it doesn't change the fact that parts of your brain are not seeing it in that way. Parts of your brain are seeing this as a huge change, moving into the unknown and unfamiliar, and those parts of your brain really don't like that happening. Getting treatment for this was also a bit of an ordeal in itself, so I googled my symptoms. I can't remember what came up, but it definitely confirmed to me that my life and world as it currently was about to end. This then got confirmed to me because the next place I went to a running store to ask if they had any shoes that had better arch support, and when they asked me why, I told them about the pain in my knees, and the guy working in the store basically told me, well, there's no cartilage anymore and you're basically talking about arthritis and you're going to be stuck with that for the rest of your life. Okay, now the obvious question is going to be, why did you go to a shoe shop before you went to see your doctor? There was a doctor's appointment already booked. I just wanted something as soon as possible, so that's why that happened in this order. But went to the doctor's office, actually not nearly as helpful as I would have liked either. The main issue there being that everybody my doctor had seen up to this point was not, in fact, training to join the circus, and therefore, other than knee bending ability, were much less mobile than me. And all of his usual standard assessments and tests I could pass with flying colors. He was kind of just left scratching his head and going, well, to be honest, you're fine. You should be able to go and work and do whatever you want, have some painkillers, and I guess come back if it keeps persisting. Now, luckily for me, a lot of former gymnasts end up becoming physios. So it just so happened that I was working with a bunch of people who were training themselves to become physios. And when I asked them to kind of check out my knee and see what was going on, one of them basically placed her hand over my knee just on the kind of outside of the quads and asked me to press my leg into the ground. And she told me when I did that, pretty much the whole inside of my thigh contracts, the outside does nothing. And when she asked what kind of training I'd be doing, and I described all of the strength training exercises, especially the leg strength training exercises I'd be doing, she basically just told me I was an idiot and I'd be doing that wrong the entire time. I had got it in my head that if I was going to train acrobatics trainings given in gymnastics, you're told you always need to land with both your legs completely together. So I was doing all my squats, all my jumps, all of that kind of stuff with both of my legs as close together as I possibly could, and that basically meant my glutes weren't getting any work done and the inner thigh was doing all the work. I felt like, now I know what's wrong, now I know the problem, and once again, I know that I've got this super strong, determined, hardcore, never gonna quit determination that means I can just start training this and the problem's gonna fix itself. Over time, I started to feel that actually the outside of my thighs, all those muscles were starting to contract and I could feel that switching on, but the pain just wasn't going away. In fact, for a little while, the fact that I could visibly able to see that I had corrected and fixed the problem, at that point, the pain started getting a little bit worse. That was like my last resort, that was my last hug, and it hadn't worked. Now, luckily this story does have a happy ending because the pain did start going away, and as far as I can tell, the catalyst for that was injuring several more parts of my body. Can't remember all of them, but I remember the injury I sustained that told me finally, look, you've got to stop training for a while and actually just sit this out, was overstretching my wrist. I kind of just told myself, look, you got to be realistic. All of these goals that you think you're going to be able to achieve before you go to this circus audition, by this point, everything is tanking so hard, you just have to accept that that's not possible for you right now. You're not going to be as good as you think you need to be to get there. You're still just going to have to go there and see what happens. Pretty much the moment I started thinking that, the pain in all of these accumulated injuries, as well as the pain in my knees, just all gradually kind of dissipated. It all just became okay without any additional intervention. And it wasn't even rest, because I still was going out all the time. I still wasn't sleeping well, and I was still going to work all the time. I actually think the bigger part was just finally closing that loop in my mind that was telling me, you have to do this and there's no other option. As soon as I opened the possibility of this additional option that actually, maybe you're just gonna fail, my whole brain and body just calmed down significantly. So in hindsight, what have I learned from all of this? I think there's obvious ones like the kind of partying and no sleep and just doing everything to 100. I think most people can jump to that conclusion. I think most people already saw that coming. For me, I think there's two important things to be learned from that. If you're in pain, your body is trying to tell you that something needs your attention. And if your response to that is, sorry, that's not an option, you might get some temporary relief. You might be able to ride that out for a little while. It's not going to last forever. If you're just constantly ignoring your pain, if you don't accept it as what it is, it's going to be following you forever. The other thing, and for me, the more powerful thing that I learned from this was the idea that your most important character traits, the parts of your personality that you've trained the most, that you're strongest in, aren't always going to be your assets. At some point, they're going to be to your detriment. I always knew for me that the one ability I had over everybody else was I could just endure horrible stuff for way longer. However, when your circumstances change, you need to be able to change with those circumstances. I would recommend take all of your top character traits, write down all the things that have made you who you are, and then just spend a week, choose each one of them and just do the opposite. So, if it's like me and you're super driven and focused, just try a week of doing nothing. If you're super friendly and outgoing and you always need people around you, spend a week in isolation and just learn what that feels like, so it's less scary if it ever happens to you unexpectedly, and learn what happens. Like, does your body talk to you more? Do you feel different sensations? Do you have different experiences? Because some of those might be the things that you're missing. It doesn't mean you have to suddenly change and be this new person. It just means you're adding a bit of this skill set to your overall self so that you're better able to deal with more circumstances that come your way. Anyway, that's long enough. That's all we got time for this particular episode. Was this useful to you? Please leave me a like or dislike. Let me know if you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff in the future. I have literally no shortage of backdated injuries that I can talk through, and I even have case studies from other people that I think could provide a really interesting lens on how we view pain and injuries and how recovery might actually work.